Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes for Story Time, and we continue with our book, The Green Mummy. Chapter 23 Just in Time. Of all the surprises in connection with the tragedy of the Green Mummy, this was surely the greatest. Sidney Bolton had undoubtedly been murdered for the sake of the emeralds, and the assassin had escaped with the spoil, for which he had sold his soul. Yet there was one of the jewels returned anonymously to Random, who could pass on the same to its rightful owner. In the midst of his amazement, Sir Frank could not help chuckling when he thought how enraged Professor Braddock would be at Don Pedro's good fortune. At the 11th hour, as it were, the Peruvian had got back his own, or at least a portion of his own. Placing the emerald in his drawer, Random gave orders to his servant that the sentry, when off duty, should be brought before him. Just as Random finished dressing for mess, and he dressed very early, so as to devote his entire attention to solving this new problem, the soldier who had been on guard appeared, but he could tell nothing more than he had already related. When doing sentry go immediately outside the gate of the fort, the packet had been slipped into the box, while the man was at the far end of his beat. It was quite dark when this was done, and the soldier confessed that he had not heard a sound, much less had he seen anyone. The person who had brought the glorious gem had watched his opportunity, and soft-footed as a cat, had stolen forward in the darkness to drop the precious parcel on the floor of the sentry box. There the man had found it, by the feel of his feet, when he stepped in some time later to escape a shower. But what time had elapsed from placing the parcel to its discovery by the sentry, it was impossible to say. It must, however, as Random calculated, have been within the hour, since before then it would not have been dark enough to hide the approach of the person, whether male or female, who carried a king's ransom in a brown paper bag. At first, Random was inclined to place the sentry under arrest for having failed so much in his duty to allow anyone to approach so near to the fort. But, as he had already been reprimanded, and moreover wished to keep the fact of the recovered jewel quiet, he simply dismissed him. When alone, he sat down before the fire, wondering who could have dared so very greatly, and for what reason the emerald had been handed to him. If it had been sent to Don Pedro, or even Professor Braddock, it would have been much more reasonable. It first occurred to him that Mrs. Jasser, out of gratitude for the way in which he had treated her, had sent him the jewel. Remembering his former experience, he smelt the parcel, but could detect no sign of the famous Chinese scent, which had proved a clue to the letter. Of course, the direction on the packet and the inscribed slip of paper were in feigned handwriting, so he could gather nothing from that. Still, he did not think that Mrs. Jasser had sent the emerald. She was desperately hard up, and if she had become in possession of the gem by murder, presuming her to have been the woman who talked to Bolton through the window, she assuredly would have sold it to supply her own needs. Certainly, if guilty, she would possess the other emerald of equal value, but undoubtedly, had she risked her neck to gain a fortune, she would have kept the entire plunder, which was likely to cost her so dear. No, whomsoever it was who had repented at the 11th hour, Mrs. Jasser was not that person. Perhaps Widow Anne was the woman who had talked through the window, and who had resorted to, and had resorted, and who had restored the emerald. But that was impossible, since Mrs. Bolton habitually took more liquor than was good for her, and would not have the nerve to deliver the jewel, much less commit the crime. The more especially as the victim was her own son. Of course, she might have found out Sidney's scheme to run away with the jewels, and so would have claimed her share. But if she had been in Pierside on that evening, and her presence in Gartley had been sworn to by 3 or 4 cronies, she would have guessed who strangled her boy. If so, not all the jewels in the world would have prevented her denouncing the criminal. With all her faults, and they were many, Mrs. Bolton was a good mother, and looked upon Sidney as the pride and joy of her somewhat dissipated life. Mrs. Bolton was certainly as innocent as Mrs. Jasser. There remained Hervey. Random laughed aloud when the name came into his puzzled head. That buccaneer was the last person to surrender his plunder or to feel compunction in committing a crime. Once the skipper got his grip on the 2 jewels, worth endless money, he would never have let go of them, not even one of them. Arguing thus, it seemed that Hervey was out of the running, and Random would think of no one else in this dilemma. He remembered that 2 heads were better than 1, and before going to dinner, he sent a note to Archie Hope, asking him to come to the fort as speedily as possible. Sir Frank, somewhat dull at dinner on that evening, and scarcely responded to the joking remarks of his brother officers. These jocular put preoccupation down to love, for it was an open secret that the baronet admired the fair Peruvian, although no one as yet knew that Random was legally engaged with Don Pedro's consent. The young man good-humoredly stood all the chaff hurled at him, but seized the opportunity to slip away to his quarters as soon as coffee came to the table and the smoking began. It was 9 o'clock before he returned to his room, and here he found Hope waiting for him impatiently. "I see you have been dining at the Pyramids," said Random, seeing that Hope was in evening dress. Archie nodded. "Yes, I don't put on this kit to have my humble chop at my lodgings, but the professor asked me to dinner to talk over matters." "What does he say?" asked Random, looking for the cigarette box. "Oh, he's very angry with Mrs. Jasser and considers that she has swindled him. He called to see her this afternoon, and so he says had a stormy interview with her." "I don't wonder at that, if he speaks as he generally does," said the other grimly, and pushing along the cigarettes. "There you are. The whiskey and the soda are on yonder table. Make yourself comfortable and tell me what the professor intends to do." "Well," said Archie, turning half round from the side table where he was pouring out the whiskey, he already had started action by sending Cockatoo to live at Sailor's Rest and spy on Hervey. "What rubbish! Hervey is going away tomorrow in the Firefly, bound for Algiers. Nothing is to be learned from him." "So I told the professor," said Hope, returning to the armchair near the fire, "and I mentioned that Don Pedro had induced the skipper to write out a full account of the theft of the mummy from Lima 30 years ago. I also said that the signed paper would be handed in at the Gartley jetty when the Firefly came downstream tomorrow night." "And what did Braddock say to that?" "Nothing much. He merely stated that whatever Hervey said toward proving the ownership of your future father-in-law, that he intended to stick to the embalmed corpse of Inca Coxus, and also that he intended to claim the emeralds when they turned up." Random rose and went to the drawer of his desk. "I am afraid he has lost 1 emerald, at all events," he said, unlocking the drawer. "What's that?" said Hope sharply. "Why did you... Oh, gosh!" He jumped up. An amazed look on Random held up the magnificent gem, from which streamed vividly green flames in the mellow lamplight. "Oh, my gosh!" gasped the artist again. "Where the devil did you get that?" "I sent for you to tell you. said Sir Frank, giving the jewel into his friend's hand and coming back to his seat. It was found in the sentry box. Hope stared at the great jewel and then at the soldier. What do you mean by that? He demanded. How the dickens could it be found in a sentry box? You must be making a mistake. Not a bit of it. It was found on the floor of the box by the sentry, as I tell you, and I have sent to consult with you as to how the deuce it got there. Hervey muttered to Archie, fascinated by the gem. Random shrugged his square shoulders. Catch that Yankee Shylock returning anything he got his grip on, even as a wedding present. As a wedding present, said Hope, more at sea than ever. If you don't mind giving me details, old chap, my head would buzz less. I rather think it would buzz more, said Random dryly, and producing the brown paper bag in which the gem had been wrapped, and the inscribed paper found within, he related all that happened. Archie listened quietly and did not interrupt, but the puzzled look on his face grew more pronounced. Well, ended Random, seeing that no remark was made when he had finished, what do you think? Lord knows. I'll go out of my mind if these sort of things come along. I'm a simple sort of chap, and have no use for mysteries which beat all detective stories I have ever read. That sort of thing is all very well in fiction, but in real life, what are you going to do? Give back the emerald to Dom Pedro. Of course, though it is given to you for a wedding present. And then? Then Random stared into the fire. I don't know. I asked you to assist me. Willingly, but how? Random pondered for a few moments. Who sent that emerald to me, do you think? He asked, looking squarely at the artist. Hope meditatively turned the jewel in his long fingers. Why not ask Mrs. Jasser? He suggested suddenly. No. Sir Frank shook his head. I fancied it might be her, but it cannot be. If she is guilty, as she must be, should she have sent the emerald? She would not part with her plunder when she is so hard up. I am beginning to believe, Hope, that what she said was true about the letter. How do you mean exactly? That the letter was merely a mere bluff, and that she really knows nothing about the crime. By the way, did Braddock learn anything? Not a thing. He merely said that the two of them fought. I expect Braddock stormed and Mrs. Jasser retorted. Both of them have too much tongue music to come to any understanding. By the way, to echo your own phrase, you had better put away this gem, or I shall be strangling you myself in order to gain possession of it. The mere sight of that gorgeous color tempts me beyond my strength. Random laughed and locked the jewel in his drawer. Hope suggested that with such a flimsy lock it was unsafe, but the baronet shook his head. It is safer here than in a woman's jewel case, he asserted. No one looks to my drawer, and certainly no one would expect to find a crown jewel of this description in my quarters. Well, he came back to his seat, slipping his keys into his trouser pocket. The whole thing puzzles me. Why not do as I suggest and go to Mrs. Jasser? In any case, you are going there tonight, aren't you? Yes, I want to decide what to do about the woman. I had intended to go alone, but as you are here, you may as well come also. I shall be delighted. What do you intend to do? Help her, said Random briefly. She doesn't deserve it, replied Hope, lighting a fresh cigarette. Does anyone ever deserve anything? Asked Sir Frank cynically. What does Miss Kendall think of the business? I suppose Braddock told her. He has too long a tongue to keep anything to himself. He told her at dinner, when I was present, Lucy is quite on your side. She says that she had known Mrs. Jasser for months and that there is good in her, although I am bound to say that Lucy was a trifle shocked. Does she want Mrs. Jasser to marry her father now? Her stepfather, corrected Archie immediately. No, that is out of the question, but she would like Mrs. Jasser to be helped out of her difficulties and have a fair start. It was only by the greatest diplomacy that I prevented Lucy going to see that wretched woman this evening. Why did you prevent her?" Archie colored. "I dare say I am a trifle prudish," he replied, "but after what has happened, I do not wish Lucy to associate with Mrs. Jasser. Do you blame me?" "No, I don't. All the same, I don't think that Mrs. Jasser is an immoral woman by any means. Perhaps not, but we needn't discuss her character, as we know precious little of her past, and she no doubt told you the story that best suited herself. I think it would be best to make her tell all she knows this evening, and then send her away with a sum of money in her pocket to begin a new life." "I shall help her, certainly," said Random, with his eyes on the fire, "but I can't say exactly how. In my opinion, that poor wretch is more sinned against than sinning." "You are a soldier with a conscience, Random." The other laughed. "Why shouldn't a soldier have a conscience? Do you take your idea of officers from the lady novelist who makes us all out to be idle idiots?" "Not exactly. All the same, many a man would not take the trouble to behave as you are doing to this unlucky woman." "Any man who was a man, whether soldier or civilian, would help such a poor creature, and I hope that you will help her also." The artist leaped to his feet impulsively. "Well, of course. I'm with you right along, as Hervey would say. But first, before deciding what we shall do to set Mrs. Jasser on her legs again, let us hear what she has to say." "She can say nothing more than she has said," remonstrated Random. "I don't believe that," replied Hope, reaching for his overcoat. "You may choose to believe that the letter was the outcome of a bluff, but I really and truly think that Mrs. Jasser is in the know. What is more, I believe that Bolton got her those clothes, and that she was the woman who talked to him, went there to see how the little scheme was progressing." "If I thought that," said Random coldly, "I would not help Mrs. Jasser." "Oh, yes. Yes, you would. The greater the sinner, the more need she or he has of help. You know, my dear fellow. But get your coat on and let us toddle. I don't suppose we need pistols." Sir Frank laughed as, aided by the artist, he struggled into his military coat. "I don't suppose that Mrs. Jasser will be dangerous," he remarked. "We'll get what we can out of her, and then arrange what is best to be done to recoup her fallen fortunes. Then she can go where she chooses, and we can, as the French say, return to our muttons." "I think Donna Inez and Lucy would be annoyed to hear themselves called muttons," laughed Archie, and the two men left the room. The night was darker than ever, and a fine rain was falling incessantly. When they left the dimly lighted archway of the fort through the smaller gates set in the larger one, they stepped into the midnight blackness, such as must have been spread over the land of Egypt. In accordance with the primitive customs of Gartley inhabitants, one of them at least should have been furnished with a lantern, as it was no easy task to pick a clean way through the mud. However, Archie, knowing the surroundings better than Random, led the way, and they walked slowly through the iron gate on the hard high road which led to the fort. Immediately beyond this, they turned towards the narrow cinder path which led through the marshes to Mrs. Jasser's cottage, and toiled on cautiously through the misty rain, which fell continuously. The fog was drifting up from the mouth of the river, and was growing so thick that they could not see the somewhat feeble lights of the cottage. However, Archie's instincts led him all right, and they blundered finally upon the wooden gate. Here they paused in shocked surprise, for a woman's scream rang out, wildly and suddenly. "What in heaven's name is that?" asked Hope, aghast. "We must find out," breathed Random, and they raced through the white cotton wool of the fog up the path. As he reached the veranda of the door, it opened, and a woman came running out screaming, but the other screams inside the cottage still continued. "What is the matter?" cried Random, seizing the woman. She proved to be Jane. "Oh, sir, my mistress is being murdered." Hope plunged past her into the corridor, not waiting to hear more. The cries had died down to a low moaning, and he dashed into the pink parlor to find in smoky darkness. Striking a match he held above his head, it showed Mrs. Jasser prone on the floor, and a dark figure smashing its way through the flimsy window. There was a snarl, and the figure vanished as the match went out. Chapter 24. A Confession. Jane was still being held by Sir Frank at the door, and was still screaming, fully convinced that her captor was a burglar, in spite of having recognized him by his voice. Random was so exasperated by her stupidity that he shook her. "What is the matter, you fool?" he demanded. "Don't you know that I am a friend?" Yes, sir, gasped Jane, fetching her breath again after the shaking. "But go for the police. My mistress is being murdered. Mr. Hope is looking after that." And the screams have ceased. "Who was with your mistress?" "I don't know, sir," sobbed the servant. "I didn't know anyone had called, and then I heard the screaming. I looked into the parlor to see what was the matter, but the lamp had been thrown over and had gone out, and there was a dreadful struggle going on in the darkness. So I screamed and ran out, and then, oh, Jane showed symptoms of renewed hysteria, and clutched Random tightly as the man came cautiously round the corner. "Are you there, Random?" asked Hope's voice. "It is so infernally dark and foggy that I've missed him." "Missed who?" "The man who was trying to murder Mrs. Jasser. He got her down when I entered and struck a match. Then he dashed through the window before I could catch him, or even recognize him. He vanished in the midst." "It's no use looking for him anyhow," said Random, peering into the dense blackness, which was thick with damp. "We had better see after Mrs. Jasser. Whom have you got there?" "Jane, who seems to have lost her head." "It's a mercy I haven't lost my life, sir, with burglars and murderers all about the place," sobbed the girl, dropping on the veranda. Random promptly hauled her to her feet. "Go and get a candle, and keep calm if you can," he said, in an abrupt military voice. "This is no time to play the fool." His sharpness had great effect on the girl, and she became much more herself. Hope lighted another match, and the trio proceeded through the passage towards the kitchen, where Jane had left a lamp burning. Seizing this from its bracket, Sir Frank traced his way along the passage to the pink parlor, followed closely by Hope and timorously by Jane. A dreadful scene presented itself. The dainty little room was literally smashed to pieces, as though a gigantic bull had been wallowing there. The lamp lay on the floor, surrounded by several extinguished candles. It was a mercy that all the lights had been put out when overturned, else the grim crack cottage would have been long since ablaze. Chairs and tables and screens were all overturned, and the one window had its rose-hued curtains torn down and its glass broken, showing only too clearly the way in which the murderer had escaped. And that man who had attacked Mrs. Jasser was a murderer, and could be seen from the stream of blood that ran slowly from Mrs. Jasser's breast. Apparently, she had been stabbed in the lungs, for the wound was on the right side. There she lay, poor woman, in her tawdry finery, crumpled up, battered and bruised, dead amongst the ruins of her home. Jane immediately began to scream again. "Stop her, Hope," cried Random, who was kneeling by the body and feeling the heart. "Mrs. Jasser is not dead. Hold your noise, woman, and go for a doctor." This was to Jane, who, prevented from screaming, took to whimpering. "I'd better go," said Hope quickly, "and I'll go to the fort and alarm the men. Perhaps they may catch the man. Can you describe him?" "Of course not," said Archie indignantly. "I only caught a glimpse of him by the feeble light of a lucifer match." Then he leaped through the window, and I after him. I made a grab at him, but lost him in the midst. I don't know in the least what he is like." "Then how can anyone arrest him?" snapped Random, raising Mrs. Jasser's head. "Give what alarm you like, but race for Robinson up the village. We must save this poor woman's life, if only to learn who killed her." But she isn't dead yet. She isn't dead, wailed Jane, clapping her hands while Hope, knowing the value of time, promptly ran out of the house to get further assistance. She soon will be, said Sir Frank, whose temper was not the best at so critical a moment in dealing with a fool. Go and bring me brandy at once, and afterwards linen and hot water. We must do our best to staunch the wound and revive her. For the next quarter of an hour, the man and the woman labored hard to save Mrs. Jasper's life. Random bound up the wound in a rough and ready fashion, and Jane fed the pale lips of her mistress with sips of brandy. Mrs. Jasper gradually became more alive, and a faint sigh escaped from her lips as her wounded bosom rose and fell and recovered breath. When Sir Frank was in hopes that she would speak, she suddenly relapsed again into a comatose state. Luckily, at that moment, Archie returned with Dr. Robinson at his heels, and also was followed by Painter, the village constable, who had luckily been picked up in the fog. Robinson whistled as he looked at the insensible woman. She had a narrow squeak, he muttered, lifting the body with the assistance of Random. Will she recover? Questioned Hope anxiously. I can't tell you yet, answered the doctor, and with Sir Frank he carried the heavy body of the window into her bedroom. He covered the heavy body of the widow into her bedroom. How did it happen? That is my business, said Painter, who had followed, and who was now filled with importance. You look after the body, sir, and I'll question these gentlemen and servants. Servant yourself. Such sauce, muttered Jane, with an angry toss of her cap at the daring young policeman. I know nothing. I left my mistress in the parlor, writing letters. Never heard anyone come in. The bell didn't sound anyhow. The first thing I knew that was anything was wrong was on hearing the screams. When I looked into the parlor, the candles in the lamp were out, and there was a struggle going on in the dark. Then I cried out, very unnaturally, I am sure, and ran straight into the arms of these gentlemen as soon as I could get to the front door. After delivering this address, Jane was called away to assist the doctor in the bedroom, and along with Archie and Random, the constable repaired to the pink parlor to hear what they had to say. Of course, they could tell him even less than Jane had told, and Archie protested that he was quite unable to describe the man who had dashed out the window. Ah, said Painter sapiently, he got out there, but how did he enter? No doubt by the door, said Random sharply. We don't know that, Sir, Jane says that she did not hear the bell. Mrs. Jasper might have let the man in, whomever he was, secretly. Why should she, sir? Ah, now you are asking more than I can tell you. Only Mrs. Jasper can explain, and it seems to me that she will die. Meanwhile, in some mysterious way, the news of the crime had spread through the village, and although it was growing late, for it was past 10 o'clock, a dozen or so villagers came along. Also, there arrived a small number of soldiers, under a smart sergeant, and to him Sir Frank explained what had happened, in the faint-hearted way for which the mist was now like cotton wool. The military and the civilians hunted through the marshes, round the cottage, hoping to come across the assassin hiding in a ditch. Needless to say, they found no one and nothing, for it was worse than looking for a needle in a bundle of hay. The man had come out of the mist, and after executing the deed had vanished into the mist, and there was not the very slightest chance of finding him. Gradually, as it drew towards midnight, the soldiers went back to the fort, the villagers to their homes, but along with the doctor and the constable, Hope and his military friend stopped on. They were determined to get to the root of this mystery, and when Mrs. Jasper became sensible, she would be able to reveal the truth. It's all of a piece with the sending of the emerald, said Random to the artist, and that is connected, as we know, with the death of Bolton. Do you think that this man who has struck down Mrs. Jasser is the same one who strangled Sidney Bolton? I should think so. Perhaps Mrs. Jasser sent the emerald after all, and this man killed her out of revenge. But how would he know that she had the emerald? God knows. She may have been his accomplice. Archie knit his brows. Who the devil can this mysterious person be? I can only reply as you have done, my friend. God knows. Well, I am certain that God will not let him escape this time. This will bring Gartley one more time to notoriety, went on Hope. By the way, I saw one of the servants from the pyramids here. Go to the pyramids then and see her, suggested Sir Frank. Mrs. Jasser is still unconscious and will be for many hours, the doctor tells me. It is too late to go to the pyramids, Random. If they know of this tragedy there, I'll bet they are not in bed. Hope nodded. All the same, I'll remain here until Mrs. Jasser can speak, he said, and sat smoking with Random in the dining room, as the most comfortable room in the house. Constable Painter camped to speak in the drawing room, keeping guard over the scene of the crime, and had placed the Chinese screen against the broken window to keep out the cold. In the bedroom, Jane and Dr. Robinson looked after the dying woman, and dying she was, according to the young physician, for he did not think she would live much longer. Round the lonely cottage, the sea mist drifted, white and thick, and darkness deepened, until, as saying goes, it could have been cut with a knife. Never was there so eerie and weary and sinister a vigil. Towards 4 o'clock, Hope fell into a doze while resting in an armchair, but he was suddenly aroused from this by an exclamation from Sir Frank, who had remained wide awake, smoking a cigar, one after another. In a moment, the artist was on his feet, alert and quick-brained. What is it? Random made for the dining room door rapidly. I thought I heard Painter call out, he declared, hastily sought for the parlor, followed by Hope. The room was empty, but the screen before the broken window had been thrown down, and they could see Painter's bulky form immediately outside. What the deuce is the matter? Demanded Random, entering. Did you call out, Painter? I fancied I heard something. The constable came in. I did not call out, sir, he confessed. I was half asleep in the chair when suddenly became wide awake, and I believed I saw a face looking at me round the corner of the screen. I jumped up, calling for you, sir, and upset the screen. Well, well? Demanded Sir Frank impatiently, and seeing that the man hesitated, I saw no one, sir. All the same, I had an idea, and I still have, that the man came through the window and peered at me from behind the screen. The man who attacked Mrs. Jasser? I can't say, sir, but there was someone. At any rate, he's gone again. If he really did come, and there is no chance of finding him, it's like pea soup outside. Hope and Random simultaneously stepped through the window, but could not see an inch before them. So thick was the sea fog, and so dense was the darkness. Returning, they replaced the screen, and telling Painter to be more on the alert, went back shivering to the fire in the dining room. When they were seated again, Archie put a question. Do you think that policeman was dreaming? He asked meditatively. No, replied Random sharply. I believe that the man who assaulted Mrs. Jasser is hanging about and ventured back into the room, relying on the fog as a means of escape, should he be spotted. But the man wouldn't be such a fool as to return to danger. Not unless he wanted something very badly, Random said significantly. Hope let the cigarette he was lighting fall. What do you mean? I may be wrong, of course, but it is my impression that there is something in the parlor which this man wants. and for which he tried to murder Mrs. Jasser. We interrupted him, and he was forced to flee. Hidden in the fog, he is lurking about to see if he can't obtain what he has risked his neck to secure. What can it be? Murmured Archie, struck by the feasibility of the theory. Perhaps the second emerald, remarked Sir Frank grimly. What? You don't think that... I don't think anything. I'm too tired to think at all. However, Painter will keep his eyes open, and in the morning we can search the room. The man has been in the house twice to get what he wanted. He won't risk another attempt, now that he's aware we are on alert. I am going to try and get 40 winks. You keep watch as you have had your sleep. Hope was quite agreeable, and just as Random composed himself to uneasy slumber, Jane, haggard and red-eyed, came hastily into the room. If you please, gentlemen, the doctor wants you to come and see the mistress. She is sensible, and the two waited to hear no more, but went hastily but softly into the room wherein lay the dying woman. Robinson had sat beside her, holding his patient's hand and feeling her pulse. He placed his finger on his lips as the men entered gently, and at the same moment Mrs. Jasser's voice, weak from exhaustion, sounded through the room, which was dimly illuminated by the candle. The newcomers halted in obedience to Robinson's signal. "Who is there?" asked Mrs. Jasser weakly, for in spite of her care exercised, she had evidently heard the footsteps. "Mr. Hope and Mr. Frank Random," whispered the doctor, speaking into the dying woman's ear. "They came in to save you." "In time to see me die?" she murmured. "And I can't die unless I tell the truth. I am glad Random is there. He is a kind-hearted boy, and treated me better than he need to have done. Oh, some brandy, some brandy." Robinson gave her some in a spoon. "Now lie quietly and do not attempt to speak," he commanded. "You need all your strength." "I do. To tell that which I wish to tell," gasped Mrs. Jasser, trying to raise herself. "Sir Frank, Sir Frank," her voice sounded hoarse and weak. "Yes, Mrs. Jasser," said the young man, coming softly to her bedside. She thrust out a weak hand and clutched him. "You must be my father confessor and hear all. You got the emerald?" "What?" Random recoiled in astonishment. "Did you?" "Yes, I sent it to you as a wedding present. I am sorry, and I was afraid, and I... She paused again, gasping. The doctor intervened and gave her more brandy. "You must not talk," he insisted severely, "or I shall turn Sir Frank and Mr. Hope out of the room." "No, no. Give me more brandy, more." And when the doctor placed a tumbler in her lips, she drank so greedily that she had to take the glass away, lest she should do herself harm. But the ardent spirit put new life into her, and with a superhuman effort, she suddenly reared herself in bed. "Come here, Hope. Come here, Random," she said in a much stronger voice. "I have much to tell you. Yes, I took the emerald after dark and threw it into the sentry box. When the man was arrested, when the man was looking, or not looking, I placed the bag with the emerald in the box. I escaped your spy, Random, and I escaped notice of the sentry. I walked like a cat, and like a cat I can see in the dark. I am glad you have got the emerald." "Where did you get it?" asked Random quietly. "That's a long story. I don't know that I have the strength to tell it. I have written it out." "You've written it out?" said Hope quickly, and drawing near. "Yes. Jane thought that I was writing letters, but I was writing out the whole story of the murder. You were good to me, Random, you dear boy, and on the impulse of the moment, I took the emerald to you. I was sorry when I got back, but it was too late then to repent, as I did not dare go near the fort again. Your spy who had watched might have discovered me the second time. I then thought that I would write out the story of the murder so as to exonerate myself. Then you are not the guilty of Bolton's death? Asked Sir Frank, puzzled, for her confession was somewhat incoherent. No, I did not strangle him, but I know who did. I have written it all down. I was just finishing it when I heard the tapping at the window. I let him in, and he tried to get the confession, for I told him what I had done. Who did you tell? Asked Hope, much excited. Mrs. Jasser took no notice. The confession is lying on my desk. All the sheets of paper are loose. I had no time to bind them together, for he came in. He wanted the emerald and the confession. I told him that I had given you the emerald, Random, and that I had confessed all in writing. Then he went mad and flew at me with a dreadful knife. He knocked me over and knocked over the candles and the lamp. Everything went out, and it was all darkness. And I lay crying for help, with that devil stabbing and stabbing. Who in heaven's name is the man? Demanded Random, standing up in his eagerness. But Mrs. Jasser had fallen back in a faint, and Robinson was again supplying her with brandy. You had better leave the room, you two, he said, and I can't be answerable for her life. I must stay and learn the truth, said Random determinedly. And you, Hope, go into the parlor and find that confession. It is on the desk, as she said, all loose sheets. No doubt it was the confession which the man she refers to tried to secure when he came back the second time. He may make another attempt, or Painter may go to sleep. Hurry, hurry. Archie needed no second telling, as he realized what hung on securing the confession. He stole swiftly out of the room. Closing the door after him, faint as was the sound, Mrs. Jasser heard it and opened her eyes. Do not go, Random, she said faintly. I have yet much to say. Although the confession will tell you all, I am half sorry I wrote it out. At least I was, and perhaps should have burnt it had I not met with this accident. Accident, echoed Sir Frank scornfully. Murder, you mean? The sinister word galvanized the dying woman in sudden strong life, and she reared herself again up on the bed. Murder! Yes, it is murder, she cried loudly. He killed Sidney Bolton to get the emeralds, and he killed me to make me close my mouth. Who stabbed you? Speak, speak, cried Random anxiously. Cockatoo. He is guilty of my death and Bolton's. And she fell back dead. Well, 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 that I did not expect. So it is Cockatoo that is apparently, according to Mrs. Jasser, guilty of 2 murders and the theft of the mummy and the emeralds. Well, we shall find out in the next chapter if all of this is true or if there is something more to it. Thank you for joining me. This has been Indiana Homes. Until next time, we'll see you in story time.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.